The following webcast is sponsored by Meemic Insurance Company.
Hi, I'm Nancy Kane, a former Detroit public school teacher, newspaper reporter, and I recently retired from AAA Michigan as their public relations director. I'm happy to be here today. Welcome to the first in our Making Sense of Michigan Auto Insurance Reform webcasts. We're creating these webcasts to help answer your questions about Michigan's new NoFault auto insurance reform. Today we're joined by Rob Ross, who is Product Vice President at the Auto Club Group, a part of AAA, headquartered in Dearborn, Michigan. Rob is also a long-standing leader with Meemic Insurance Company, which is also headquartered right here in Michigan. So it's safe to say that Rob knows his stuff when it comes to Michigan auto insurance. Welcome, Rob.
Hi there, thanks Nancy.
During today's webcast, Rob will help answer, from a product standpoint, some key questions from local drivers about Michigan's new reform law. While we won't be able to cover all of your questions today, we will be creating more webcasts as part of our Making Sense of Michigan Auto Insurance Reform webcast series. So stay tuned. Now let's jump to our first question today from Kathy in Royal Oak.
Hi Nancy and Rob. My question is this. What exactly is the NoFault auto insurance reform law?
Hi Kathy. Today every driver licensed in Michigan, myself included, is required by law to have NoFault auto insurance, which includes coverage for personal injury protection. If a person is injured in an accident, personal injury protection can help pay for allowable expenses such as medical bills and lost wages, and this is what customers will have selection options for in July, which we'll be discussing some more today. And the coverage applies regardless of who's at fault for causing the accident. That's why it's also referred to as no-fault insurance.
Other states have no-fault insurance laws. What makes Michigan so different?
That's true. There are several states in the U.S. with no-fault auto insurance requirements. But Michigan's no-fault law is different because it provides for unlimited medical benefits coverage for the lifetime of the injured person if that person was hurt in an accident.
That brings us to our next question from Mike from Detroit. Hi, Mike.
Hi there. What I'd like to know is why Michigan is changing the law.
The cost of auto insurance in Michigan has climbed sharply in recent decades, in part because of the rising costs of medical treatment for injuries resulting from auto accidents. Today, Michigan drivers pay some of the highest auto insurance premiums in the country. The new law is intended to help drivers lower their costs with new options for coverage.
So the law is intended to help control the cost of auto insurance in Michigan?
That's right. When certain parts of the new law go into effect in July 2020, people will be able to choose from different coverage options for personal injury protection. So if a driver switches from their current unlimited coverage to a lower level of personal injury protection coverage, they could see savings on their premium.
So I can save on my insurance by lowering my personal injury protection coverage?
In essence, yes. And the thought is that the new law will help people do just that. That said, I'd like to stress every driver in Michigan should speak directly with their agent or a trusted professional when deciding which personal injury protection coverage level fits their situation.
Our next question comes from Steve from Macomb.
Hi. I guess what I'd like to know is, why is reform happening now?
Well, Steve, in recent years there's been a significant increase in drivers who don't have proper insurance coverage or any coverage at all for that matter. In fact, about 20% of drivers in Michigan are driving without auto insurance. That's 1 in 5 drivers, which isn't good for any of us in Michigan. We're very hopeful that the new law, because it gives people more options to manage costs, can help reduce the number of drivers who aren't insured at all.
So in addition to helping lower costs, the new law should help reduce the number of people who might otherwise risk driving without any auto insurance coverage. That's good for every driver in Michigan.
That's the intent, Nancy, and we're hopeful that will be the case.
That's helpful. So let's jump to our next question. This one's from Grace from Grand Rapids.
Hi, I'm Grace, and what I'd like to know is, how will reform affect the cost of my insurance?
That's probably the question we hear most often. And of course, the answer will depend in part on the level of coverage a driver chooses. The estimated average cost savings for drivers who decide to keep their unlimited coverage as they have it today will be about 10% on the personal injury protection portion of their insurance costs. It's important to keep in mind, though, personal injury protection is just part of the coverage on your policy. The savings we're talking about here is related to the personal injury protection portion of your auto insurance coverage and not the entire policy.
So the 10% savings is not on the total amount of my premium, just on what I pay for my personal injury protection coverage, right?
Yes, and under the new law, since drivers can now choose lower coverage options for personal injury protection, they could see even further savings. At Meemic, we're creating online tools and developing content to help our members determine how the new law could impact their auto insurance costs. Our goal at Meemic is to educate our members, so when people start renewing their policies on or after July 2nd, 2020, they'll have the information they need to decide which coverage options works best for them.
As people start thinking about their coverage options, what other things should they be considering?
It's important to think about auto insurance coverage as a whole. While drivers will be able to select lower cost coverage options for personal injury protection, they may have to show they have healthcare coverage from their employer or Medicare coverage. People should also think about other coverage areas of their policy that provides liability coverage if you're involved in an accident and injure someone. At the end of the day, I think people just want to know they have insurance coverage that fits their needs and their budget. We'll be covering these topics and answering more of your questions in some of our upcoming Reform webcasts.
So our second to last question comes from Sarah, who lives in Lansing.
Hello, when will I have to make changes to my auto insurance policy?
Good question, Sarah. This part of the new law will go into effect on July 2nd, 2020, but that doesn't mean every driver in Michigan will have to update their policy on that day. You won't have to make any changes regarding personal injury protection options until you renew your policy. But in order to make the transition easier, you can make your new selections in advance of your renewal date. It's also worth mentioning that drivers who want to keep their current unlimited personal injury protection coverage can.
So drivers like me, regardless of whether we decide to keep our current personal injury protection coverage or switch to a different level of coverage, will wait until our policies are up for renewal?
That's right, Nancy. So for example, if your policy isn't up for renewal until September 2020, you can wait until then to update it. And as I mentioned earlier, if drivers do switch from their current personal injury protection coverage, it's a good idea to understand all of your coverages to be sure you've made selections to help meet your particular needs.
Our final question for today's webcast comes from Rodney in Saginaw.
My question is this: what things should I be doing now to prepare myself for reform?
There are a few things all of us drivers in Michigan can do, Rodney. I think the best thing drivers can do today is to familiarize themselves with their current coverage. The new law impacts your personal injury protection coverage, but it's just one of the coverages included on your policy. Also consider your assets when making changes to your policy. There's more to think about than just lower costs. Lower coverage limits could expose you to expensive medical bills or even lawsuits. If you have savings accounts, a 401k, a home, or other assets, they could be at risk as well if you don't have proper coverage. We also recommend you discuss your plans with your family so everyone understands your coverage moving forward. You can always reach out to your agent. Your agent is there to help answer your questions and provide you information about the coverage options. Lastly, Meemic has created the Online Reform Center, which has a lot of helpful information like FAQs, videos, and other content to help you better understand how the new law may affect your insurance options. It's a great resource.
Well, thanks for your time today, Rob. This has been really helpful.
Thank you, Nancy.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's webcast. In the coming weeks and months, we'll be answering more of your reform questions in upcoming episodes of our Making Sense of Michigan Auto Insurance Reform webcast series. So stay tuned.